Hey everybody, and welcome back to BK's Bullets. Today we're going to be talking about the X-Men event 10 of Swords. Hey everybody, welcome back to BK's Bullets. As always, I'm your host, Brent, and today we're going to be talking about the X-Men event 10 of Swords, or X of Swords. So, I just spent the last maybe 3 days trying to read, but I did read all 22 parts of this X-Men event. This is the biggest X-Men event I think I've read ever. And I'm not a big X-Men guy. I pop in here and there with things I like and things that, interest me. I really liked the beginning of Grant Morrison's X-Men run. I have the trades for Evolution and what's the second one where they defeat Cassandra Nova, Imperial X or something like that. I think I have that one. I'm looking at my shelf over here. What do I have? Imperial. I have Evolution. E is for Evolution. Imperial. New Worlds. Rise of Planet or what's the other one? Riot at Xavier's and Planet X. And I never finished out that run for some reason. And I did read it like in Barnes & Noble, like when they had chairs you could sit in. And I was like left scratching my head. It's very strange. So this is Jonathan Hickman's run on the X-Men after he relaunched it with House of X and Powers of X, which I think sometimes people call House of 10, Powers of 10. It's kind of this weird thing where it's like, you want to use a Roman numeral, but you're talking about the X-Men, which stands for Xavier. So when you put an X in anything related to X-Men, people want to say X, not 10. And the way that they've been putting these X's on the X books in Powers of 10 or 10 of Swords, X of Swords, they're just using a regular X sign instead of like sometimes you see the Roman numeral with the X with the bars on top. That kind of, make sure you know it's a Roman numeral if it's like Times New Roman style or whatever. So they're not changing the font or anything to make it clear that this is a Roman numeral. It's deliberately misleading, in my opinion, what you want to call it. So if I call it 10 of Swords or if I call it X of Swords a lot here, that's why. So we're just going to know it's the X-Men event by Jonathan Hickman's 22 freaking parts, 10 of Swords, X of Swords, whatever you want to call it. So yes, this is 22 parts. This is an outrageously long crossover. I did enjoy it. I read all 22 parts from part 1 in creation all the way down to part 22. I just finished up here a couple minutes ago. Destruction. And those are both like bookend one-shots, and there's a middle one called Stasis. And, Hickman has this weird thing where he likes to set up things a long time coming, and this is one of those things that I don't really think he did. You had to be reading the Excalibur X-Men book to really kind of not even know what's going on, because it felt rather sudden that all of a sudden here was Apocalypse's grandson Summoner that showed up and was talking about this other mutant island, Araco, and stuff. But really, you had to be reading Excalibur to know that Apocalypse was, doing all these machinations in Otherworld, which is a thing unto itself, or Avalon. We were in Avalon, and that they were talking to this queen called Saturnyne. And I was reading her name for a long time as like Saturnyne or something like that, or Saturn is what I was calling her in my head. And I was watching some of these Excalibur omnibus things from Near Mint Condition, and Omar called her Saturnyne, and I looked at it again. I was like, oh yeah, it is Saturnyne, which is a weird name, but it's very, very deep in terms of that lore, which I'm very unfamiliar with. So the wackiness and stuff I can get behind, but it was just very strange to have like the entire first 11 parts of this be pure dour setup and just like we're gonna go and fight to our doom, and it's like I was expecting a tournament of one-on-one matches is how they set this up for 11 parts, is that we were gonna get this massive tournament of 10 matches, 11 matches or whatever to the death, and they set up at the beginning of the first part of this event that if you die over in Otherworld, you can come back, but you will not be yourself. So if you're like a casual X-Men fan, I'm talking about all these different things, and you're like, what is going on? Well, let me clue you in. The first thing you need to read is this right here. And I have read this, and I did an overview here on the channel. This is the House of X, Powers of X, House of 10, Powers of 10, again, however you want to call it. This is the massive hardcover that launched 1,000 ships in terms of Hickman's X-Men run. And it's incredible. It's got two artists on here, Pepe Larraz and R.B. Silva. I think R.B. Silva sticks around for some of this X-Men, X of Swords stuff. But this is kind of where everything starts with. If you're unfamiliar that the X-Men can now resurrect themselves freely in terms of golden eggs, in some weird way, you need to read this book. If you don't know that Apocalypse is now friends with the X-Men, you need to read this book. If you're unaware that Mr. Sinister is now kind of a friend with the X-Men, you need to read this book. If you didn't know that Magneto, Apocalypse, Professor X, Mr. Sinister, and who's the red-faced guy there, along with the White Queen and Sebastian Shaw, all sit on a council together and rule the X-Men or the mutant world, you need to read this book. Because it's all set up in here. This Otherworld stuff is not set up in here, but this is the basic stuff that will, if you read it, it'll help you assess that, there is a threat to the X-Men in that they can't be resurrected again. Or they can, they just don't come back as themselves. So what the X-Men have been doing is, every once in a while, they will download, or upload their soul or memories, cortex, whatever you want to call it. I guess technically you don't have a soul if you're an X-Men now, because you're just downloading uploading your memories to the cloud of Cerebro every once in a while. So if you die, your body is dead, right? And then they have a clone body that they've grown out of these golden eggs from Goldballs, who was in Bendis's run. And then they take your Cerebro upload file, whatever it is, your soul, whatever you want to call it, your memories, and then they reinsert them into this clone body, which is just as you were, basically, and resurrect you that way. And then I think there's some other person that comes in and has to awaken you, and then they kind of fill in the blanks between you when you died and when you came back somehow. And then you're like, oh, I died, what happened? Where have I been? That kind of thing. So if you die in Otherworld, apparently that file in the cloud up here, so to speak, is corrupted. So they'll put something in this body, but it could be you on another dimension. It's like somehow because of the Otherworld connection, it grabs all these different versions of you and makes you come back different. So they're basically like, well, this is the threat, is, to put the stakes in here. Because you're like, if the X-Men can't die, then no, there's no big deal. Well, now you can't die technically, and we can bring you back. You're just not going to be yourself, and you, as we knew you, will never exist again. So that's the big threat in this tournament, is that if you die in Otherworld, you cannot come back as yourself. You will be something else, someone else, and just in the same body. So they established that very early on. But this whole thing, to a casual reader, is not going to read very well. I'm a semi-casual reader. I've read House of X, Powers of X. I haven't read it in the trade, but I read it when it came out. So I'm going to reread it again and do a review on it. But if you haven't been keeping up, I mean, good luck to you. This is just one of those events where you have to be invested, and they do not do a lot of hand-holding here for you. That's for sure. And it's not a downside. It's just unfortunate that it's not something like, Civil War, another Marvel event you can read, just come in blank and get the whole thing here. Like, you cannot do that with this massive crossover. But it was really set up to be very, very dour. And then when we got over there, you get a little bit of this Otherworld weirdness. And then once the tournament starts, you get one or two, battles to the death, so to speak. And they end very quickly, which is nice for a writing standpoint, that you're not just going to read the same thing over and over again across the next 11 issues. But then they turn it into this weird, the rules are never explained to the mutants, to the X-Men, ahead of time. They're never explained to the reader either. So when these twists happen, and the tournament turns out to be whatever the heck this Saturnyne Omniversal Magistrix wants, it comes as a twist, and you're just kind of left like, well, this is odd. I thought this was a duel to the death, and you're over here looking at Wolverine like, did you know this was happening? And Wolverine's like, I don't know, bub. And then you as the reader are reading it going, I thought this was going to be a duel to the death. And then it's not that at all. In some places, right? There's a finale and there's a duel to the death, and then all of a sudden there's an army that appears out of nowhere, like literally at the end of Excalibur number 15. This is part 21 of 22. An army appears in between issues, in between part 21 and part 22, which is X of Swords Destruction. And it's like, where did the army come from? Because the last I saw them, they were like in a tournament all together. And then, boom, with a new issue, there's an army surrounding them. That was very odd. The other odd thing here, and this, the lore thing with Hickman, like, he's just making it up as he goes along, and he's doing a very cool job of it. Like, this is a masterpiece, in my opinion. It was fantastic to read. This Ten of Swords event, I don't think it's going to go down that way, because there's no, there's a little bit of setup in Creation, the one shot that kicks all this off in terms of the other mutant world of Krakoa. Like, Krakoa is an island, and then there's this other island that apparently was its twin, or they were one island at some point in time millions of years ago, and it's called Arakko. And Krakoa and Arakko are both like, if you mix the letters around, they have the same letters. I forget what it's called. But anyway, so they're like twin islands basically, and they got separated when Apocalypse was somehow ruling Krakoa. This is like all the new history that the Hickman is developing here with the X-Men. I don't remember any of this ever, that Apocalypse was ruling Krakoa of all things. Maybe this new timeline that we're in now with the X-Men. But anyway, Arakko went into Otherworld. This island went somewhere else. And again, this is a living island just like Krakoa is. And then somehow the mutants of Arakko fended off this other entity called Amenth, which is like the demons from hell kind of thing. But not from hell, but a different kind of hell, basically. And they have this helmet that's called Annihilation, and it went on Genesis's head. Now, who's Genesis? Well, the Genesis apparently is Apocalypse's long-lost wife, and she's wearing this big helmet, and when you wear the helmet, you're called Annihilation, and the Annihilation Helmet is kind of like, it's got a soul to it, or it's like the helm of Dr. Fate. It's got something thinking and speaking for you, and it controls you, or it can. So, eventually, Amenth took over Arakko, and now Amenth and Arakko are now coming for Otherworld, and that's what starts this big event in Creation. Now, why is Amenth and Arakko both start with A's in very, very short words? I don't know. I would have called Amenth something else. Maybe there's a meaning to it if it's like, based in another language or something like that. That's not made clear here. So it makes it very weird to understand the relationships between these different groups, between Arakko and Amenth, as you're reading the story, until much, much later when it's made clear that, yes, they are two different groups, but because there's been so long, they're kind of now acting as one. And then there's the army of Amenth. This is the army that appears between parts 21 and 22 of this massive crossover. And they're nowhere to be seen until the very last second. And this is the big threat that everybody was worried about, but we didn't see them until the very last second. And then they're all fighting, and then it's over, it's done. And it all turns out to be a setup kind of thing from Saturnyne, who knew what was going to happen all along. So, all in all, it's a fun event to read. I think, because I'm getting on here 15 minutes now. It's a fun event to read, but it's not a satisfying event. Because any big conclusion that's built up is cut away by the fact that this is all machinations of Saturnyne and Otherworld. This is something that she wanted to get. And, I mean, we knew she was the puppeteer. She was puppeteering the entire tournament at all times. But the fact that the destruction thing lays out like it's, almost narrating the events as if it was a flashback instead of the actual events as they're happening, they have no impact, therefore. And it sucks away the impact of the last 22 issues. Some of these were double-sized, so it's going to be a big, thick hardcover. It sucks away the impact because it's more of a narrated story to you at the end as opposed to something that happens and is immediate. And I think that's one of the things that Hickman suffers from. He gets really cerebral sometimes. He gets really wild, really crazy ideas. And this is one of those crazy ideas, like, it was going to be fun, just like this tournament was really cool and it was really dour. And this was going to be a badass X-Men story because Apocalypse has been so dour in the Excalibur issues and he's up to something. He built this Otherworld gate in like the last 6 issues of Excalibur, which you wouldn't know reading this story from Creation. They did a terrible job setting all this up. And then he flips it on its head and makes it this wacky, crazy tournament, and you're like, am I reading Doom Patrol or X-Men? And then it goes back to dour and then sucks away the dour because it becomes almost third-person narration, almost like a history of events instead of you living the events with the X-Men. So, all in all, I think it's a 3 out of 5 crossover, honestly. I think it suffers from that, what I just explained, and it suffers from being way too long as well. The standout issue, I think, like the first part of these 22 parts, the first 11 parts is the X-Men gathering all their swords. That could have been shrunken down, like a ton. There was 2 issues in here for Wolverine going to get the Muramasa blades. That could have been 1 or half an issue, that's for sure. The only issue that I really liked from the X-Men gathering their swords was the one with Storm going to Wakanda to steal this vibranium sword that means so much to the people. That's the only one that I really, really liked that stood out to me. And I'm going to look on my iPad here to see which one that was. I want to say, yes, this is Marauders number 13 is that issue that I'm talking about here, where Storm goes to get this vibranium sword from Wakanda. But everything else was like, you could have squashed this. You really could have, or put it all into one issue. All the X-Men going to get their different swords and maybe have 1 or 2 spotlights. But to spotlight every 10 swords was a lot. It was not necessary, that's for sure. And some of them didn't even get their own issue because they weren't that important. Very strange, very strange. But, I don't know. Hickman, as kind of 3 stars out of 5 as this ended up being, I think this is going to be a legendary thing going forwards because it's just so massive, and people are going to either probably love it or hate it, honestly. And I think his run on X-Men is going to be one that we're going to be talking about in years to come, the way that, we talk about Chris Claremont, because he kind of turned over the X-Men table here in this volume right here and, set a new toy shelf for himself to play with. Ideas nobody's ever thought of, and just this really took it to the next level. And it leaves me excited to see where Hickman is going with the X-Men. Very, very interesting. So, how do you read 10 of Swords? Well, you can read them all on digital. Go to Comixology and click through all the past issues of these series. Like, it is ridiculous how many series there are. This dominated every X-Men title for the last, 3 months or so, except for Juggernaut. Juggernaut's not part of this. But you've got X-Factor in here, Wolverine, X-Force, Marauders, Hellions, New Mutants, Cable, Excalibur, X-Men, plus the 3 one-shots. So you can go look at those, buy them all there. Or you can buy this massive $100 hardcover. Like, this is 12 issues in a soft cover. This is going to be a hardcover. I think it comes out in January. It's just funny to me. It's going to be 22 issues, massive. It's in 1 volume. Like, this is, to me, I would split it up into 2. Maybe they will in if they do a paperback. But it says hardcover, and they're going to sell it for $100. A massive hardcover for $100. So the 22 issues. So it's like twice this thickness. It's going to be huge. and I'm kind of thinking about buying it just because it's this massive 22 issue hardcover, which nobody ever really asked for. So I don't know. There's it just leaves me with a smile on my face because of how kind of ridiculous some of these things were, and the ridiculousness of the fact that I just read a 22-part crossover in the last 3 days, and then still was kind of like, meh. Like, was that a good use of my time? I don't know. But yeah, those are my thoughts on the X of Swords or 10 of Swords event. Let me know down below what you thought of it. And we will see you guys next time here in the Funny Pages. Thank you for liking, commenting, and subscribing. We will see you guys next time here on BK's Bullets.